Hi everyone, and welcome to Know Thine Enemy, Episode 2, Electric Boogaloo. I am your host, Walt, and like you, I'm a bad Commander player. But you're in luck, because I know some good Commander players, and they're going to teach me and you how to be a better player. Or else. This week, I'm joined by Vince. Vince, I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle. Sorry, introduce yourself, please.
One thing, before we get into this podcast proper, I would revise that statement about me being a good Commander player.
Oh.
I think that's kind of setting expectations a little too high.
It's an assumption I shouldn't make without knowing the answer.
You shouldn't assume how good I am at Magic.
I hear that if you assume, you do make an ass out of you and me.
Yeah. Alright. I'm Vin.
Yes, sorry, introducing yourself. That's usually helpful for people.
Hey, I'm Vin. I sit on the executive committee for the Greensboro Commander community, and I've been brought on today by my good friend Walt to teach him how to be a better Commander player.
Sounds good. How long have you been playing Magic the Gathering for?
Oh, fuck. Hard questions, huh?
Or Commander. Maybe just Commander. How long do you reckon you've been playing Commander for?
Just Commander. I probably started around the same time that Shadows of Innistrad released, so that's what? Yeah, that's got to be a while. That's 5 years, right?
That's got to be a while. I've got no idea. This is during that murky period where I did not touch a Magic the Gathering card because I was obsessed when I was about 11 years old, and then bought packs until I was about 16, 17, and then haven't played until now, and I'm not 17 anymore. How long ago was that? Did you look it up?
I have been playing Commander specifically for about 5 years.
Wow, long time.
Originally started in 2016 when a friend of mine picked up one of the precons and he told me to build a deck. For my first ever deck, and I'll never forget it, was Anna Fenza +1/+1 counters. And oh man, that deck sucked. It was great fun.
I'm only laughing because Vince has about 1 billion Abzan decks, so it's so funny to me that even their first deck was
I actually got
Abzan.
A whole bunch of my decks here. I have all told about 6 Abzan decks. And
6 specifically Abzan. How many decks do you have in total for Commander?
I have 8.
75%!
Yeah. I run Around Me and that Pauper Storm deck.
That's funny. And your Around Me deck, it's still graveyard shenanigans. You've got a real...
It's still graveyard,
real type. I appreciate it, honestly. I think, last episode I was speaking with Aaron, and I was sort of trying to find the quintessential Aaron-ness of how he plays. And it was a lot harder than when I was thinking about you. Because Aaron's, he has a particular way of building a deck, but the actual decks themselves end up in these, very different spots.
Yeah. The philosophy behind it.
Mm.
Same philosophy. Every single deck is the same philosophy with him. Man, he plays some wildly different decks, though.
Yeah, it's hugely different. I remember the first time I saw him play, he has... I'm not going to remember. Maybe you can remember. I think she's Azorius. The Voltron deck where...
all the auras...
Bruna.
Alabaster...
something Alabaster, yeah.
I think it's Alabaster Light or something.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I remember that deck.
Yeah. It's terrifying, but it doesn't feel very Aaron. Aaron... I remember the first time I saw it and I was like, oh wow, that is different from a lot of the stuff that he plays. But then as I've gotten to know him better, yeah, more and more decks load, and you're like, oh no, Aaron just plays lots of different stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can trace my Abzan heritage back to when I started. It would have been 10 years ago now. I just played Abzan in every single deck I ever had. From kitchen table when I was a wee little thing to now not so Wii anymore.
Wow. It's the legacy.
Yeah, it is.
That's cool. It's honestly awesome. I've got like particular colors that I favor, but I do sometimes wonder like how much better I would know the colors if if you just played the same colors over and over again. I feel like you'd get to know them so much better. You'd become kind of like like an Abzan master or something.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, I did ask Aaron this, and I am interested to hear your thoughts on this as well.
All right.
If you think of the last game of Commander that you won, was your deck building or your deck piloting more important? And if you can, what percentage do you think each contributed? Is it 70% deck building, 30% deck piloting, 80-20? What do you reckon?
Oh, it was the summer of '98. I just graduated. In all seriousness, it was probably before lockdown, the most recent lockdown we had. I haven't played Magic in a while. I'm pretty sure it was a CDH game with Stubbs and Butters. I was playing my Carador combo deck. That deck is a doozy to really get into. I think a lot of it really relies on the deck building, but if you don't know the lines of play within those sort of combo decks, it can really fall flat on you. I think it's pretty easily like a 50-50 split.
I didn't think of lines of play. I feel like that almost fits a middle ground, do you think, between sort of what you would call deck building and what you would call deck piloting? Because it's something you need to be aware of when you're building the deck, because you need to know, what your win con is and how you get there and the best ways to get there. But you then that skill needs to transfer into when you're piloting, because you need to know when to make the play, and you need to know, can I play this combo piece now, or will that be removed instantly? Can you give an example of a line of play in the Carador deck?
The main win con is Safi and Friends, which is an infinite combo between Safi, Eric's daughter, and any creature that, when it enters, it brings another creature with it. Play Safi, play the other creature, sacrifice Safi, targeting the other creature, sacrifice the other creature, dies, comes back because it's Safi, brings back Safi, loop ad nauseum, right? But like the issue with that is because 2 cards in a 100 card singleton deck, the lines of play to get those cards is really, really, really important. And this you brought up like knowing when to play a combo piece, and I'll talk about this later on. But knowing when to overextend and when to not is really important, and that comes into that playing the game and knowing how to play the game as opposed to deck building.
I definitely empathize with that. I think I still, whenever I say this out loud, James always says that's bullshit, Walt. But I think I'm a terrible player specifically. I think I'm actually a pretty good deck builder. I've done it a lot of times, and I consider a lot of information. I'm very good at Scryfall, which is very useful for those who haven't used it before. Super useful for finding cards. But I think I'm a shocking deck pilot, and I think well, this almost goes back to you playing a lot of Abzan. Do you think that that playing a lot of one deck or even a lot of similar sorts of decks can give you that sort of implicit understanding of when to go and when to stop?
I think yes, provided that you translate those skills correctly, because I have 6 Abzan decks, right? And somehow none of them play the same. Pretty fond of that. But I can't take the skills I've learned from Carador and move it to Tayam. It's a completely different philosophy of deck, right? Because my Tayam deck is Enchantress, not combo, and it is like 2 grand less. So there are a whole bunch of cards that are in Carador that aren't in Tayam that I have to physically remind myself aren't in there, right? And that, like, kind of shifting the mindset from deck to deck, I think can almost hinder you because you get stuck in the familiarity of white, black, green. This is a white, black, green deck. I know how to play that. And then I default to my favourite way of playing it, which can often be incorrect.
Interesting. Wow, I hadn't thought of that. So there are kind of traps you can fall into, even as you are, theoretically becoming a better player. You got to be careful not to become a better player in a way that makes you worse at something else, almost.
Yeah.
Or I guess you just got to be
definitely.
wary of the skills that you're gaining and the fact that they're not, universally applicable, if that makes sense. Well, this sort of ties into the next question then. If we're thinking about having lots of different kinds of decks and the ways that different decks, play differently, is there, like, sort of moving in the opposite direction, are there any universal deck building rules that you always come back to? I'm thinking of the kind of thing that Command Zone, Command Zone say always have 10 bits of ramp, always have 10 bits of card draw, that kind of thing. When you're building a deck, do you have sort of rules in your mind that you follow?
I did have one. It was one that I, stuck to for Commander for the past, 4.5 years that I played Commander. I've only recently broken free from it, and that was to not play blue.
I was so expecting an actual answer, you asshole. Oh, man.
I can give you an actual answer.
No, well, it is an actual answer. No, legitimately. There are new people to Commander who will be listening to this. And the number one bit of advice that Vince can give you after 5 years of play is don't play blue. Just don't do it.
Honestly, it sounds like a joke. I promise you it's not. I used to play Standard, right? Back when Oko was still legal. Back when Eldraine was fun and cool. Back then, right, I played Esper Control. Holy moly, I cannot count on both hands how many migraines that deck gave me. My Pauper Storm deck gives me less migraines than Esper Control, which is baffling because the counterplay of, the bluffing, keeping mana open, keeping counterspells open, knowing when to wipe the board, all sorts of things. Control, and by extension, blue, is way more difficult than pretty much every other deck I've ever played.
Do you think as well, I've heard this a few times said about Commander, that people who are familiar with 60 card formats, like Pauper, like Standard formats where, for those who don't know, you can have 4 copies of the same card. So, your decks can be remarkably consistent. When you contrast that to something like Commander, which is singleton for one, so you can only have 1 copy of every card, and there's 4 players instead of 2, do you think that that sort of Standard players and people who play those formats, when they come to Commander, kind of realize that Control doesn't work, or that Control looks different in Commander?
I really like this topic of the dichotomy between 2-player and multiplayer formats. I don't think this is necessarily an issue with less consistent decks. I think this is an issue with the efficiency of cards, right? I'll bring up 2 examples. Lightning Bolt and Boonweaver Giant. 2 vastly different cards, both having great effects on one side and dubious effects on another. Lightning Bolt in Commander is relegated to creature removal. That's about it. You're not going to use it for burn, right? In those 2-player formats, Lightning Bolt's literally the best spell in Magic. But then you go over to Boonweaver, right? 7 mana spell, does fuck all. Maybe gets an aura in those 2-player formats. It's just so slow. Commander, though, you have the assurance that you're going to get to 7 mana. A game not getting to 7 mana is a very, very quick game in Commander. Someone's combo down on turn 2 or 3.
It's probably CDH, realistically. Yeah.
The efficiency of cards is very different, and how they play compared to single player and multiplayer formats.
No, absolutely. I think there's a term that's often used to sort of describe similar things, which is card advantage. And it's kind of deceptively complicated because when people hear it at first, they think, oh, if I have more cards in my hand than my opponent, then I have card advantage. And look, in 60 card formats, 1v1 formats, maybe that's somewhat true. But yeah, in Commander, you're sort of fighting a losing battle. If you're always, particularly with something like a counterspell, if you're always trading your counterspell for something that an opponent is casting, you're losing. Unless you have a way to be constantly drawing cards, you are trading 1-for-1 with a table that has pooled 3 times the resources that you do. So you will run out of cards. And having played blue, I'm sorry to say, it happens. Like,
how dare you? I thought we were friends.
You're fighting a losing battle. Control, I think, in Commander becomes much more about picking your moments, which I think Commander is a lot about in general. But yeah, when you're holding up a counterspell, you've got to be really thinking like, I know that looks scary, but there are 2 players who haven't gone yet, and I have no idea what they're going to cast. They've got 7 mana. Maybe they're going to cast a Zendikar Resurgent. Yeah, maybe someone's going to cast a Ruinous Ultimatum or some huge game-ending spell, and I've wasted my counterspell. It becomes this really delicate balance, which is it's sort of fun, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like the underlying philosophy of Control is trading 1-for-1 until you can pull ahead with board wipes and like those one big beefy dudes to swing in. In Commander, it doesn't really work like that because you brought it up. Like you're not playing 1-for-1, you're playing 1 against 3, which is, like you said, losing battle. Really not a great position to be in.
No, it's true. Speaking of bad positions, no, it doesn't make sense. Never mind. Seamless segue.
I thought it was a fine segue, actually. I reckon you probably could have gone from there.
No, but what if I say seamless segue? Do you think that works better?
Got me there.
We're moving on.
Moving on.
What is the worst habit you can have as a Magic player?
Oh, overextending. Learning when to overextend and when not to. Really, really crucial. Like, if you overextend correctly and no one answers it, you win. Almost every single time. But that involves risk. And, like, knowing when to analyse that risk and knowing when you're good to go, in a sense, is very, very important, especially when you get to like that higher level CDH stuff. Overextending, generally in aggro decks, means playing a bunch of creatures out, right? If you overextend too hard and someone hits you with like a Doomscar or something, then you boned, because your head's empty, you got nothing to do, you are dead. In graveyard decks, very, very similar. Except creatures on the board get replaced with creatures in the graveyard. Graveyard hate in Commander generally isn't seen, and this is coming from someone who has played graveyard decks for 5 years. It doesn't happen unless they have built the deck to hate the meta, essentially, right? The meta of the store.
I guess there's the occasional Bojuka Bog, but in a 100-card deck.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you would know. You've played enough of the decks, I guess, and you're saying here, that you don't see Bojuka Bog very often, sounds like.
I saw it in one game, and that was the turn after a Yokel Hops. So, that wasn't fun.
Yokel Hops inherently is not very fun. This is the Yokel Hops that destroys like everything, right? Creatures' lands?
Everything except enchantments and planeswalkers.
And artifacts.
I do believe it hits artifacts.
Is it all artifacts, creatures, lands? Wow.
I'm gonna look it up.
It'll be up on the screen now. So you'll probably know before we will. Oh man, if your graveyard gets exiled after that, that's brutal.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't my Carador deck. That was Garve, which was my token Abzan deck. So I was fine. Play Garve, make 15 billion saplings, whatever. It's fine. I can recover from there. Man, yeah, overextending and learning when not to is ultimately the best habit you can ever have.
Interesting. What do you think if we imagine the sorts of commanders that the people who are new to Commander often build, I think you can normally narrow them down to some sort of creature strategy, I would say. Like, I think a super common early one would be Krenko, or is it Rishkar, who...
Rishkar, yep, Pima again.
The +1 counters ones tap for green. Yeah, there you go. If we're imagining those sorts of decks that the new players often play, yeah, what do you think overextending looks like?
Literally just playing their deck is overextending in those sorts of things. Because they're so reliant on creature strategies. And board wipes are almost ubiquitous in Commander.
Yeah, how can a new player minimize that overextending? Is it a matter of playing, cards like Heroic Intervention, or is it more about the strategy of saying, I don't want to empty my hand? What does the sort of avoiding that overextending look like, do you think?
Well, I could give the dickhead answer and say just play graveyard decks. It'll work out. But I think cards like Heroic Intervention get too much of them. They're overvalued. That's what I'm saying. They're way overvalued. One card, 100 card singleton, on the turn that you get board wiped. You need to have mana open, and it needs to be... Like, you countering that board wipe needs to not put your opponents ahead. Now, Heroic Intervention doesn't counter the board wipe, it just stops your creatures from dying. But the philosophy is the same.
Interesting. So you'd rather hold back, do you think, than rely on a card like Heroic Intervention? You'd rather, say you've got 3 cards in hand, and you've got your 8 mana or whatever, particularly if it's a Rishkar deck, maybe you've got 10.
50 billion more
available. Yeah, probably. Is it a matter of looking at the board and seeing, oh wow, I've got twice as many creatures as everyone else. Someone's probably gonna cast a Wrath of God here. I shouldn't play the cards in my hand, or is it more a question of like holding something back? What do you think? Avoiding that really feels bad moment of everything dying. What's the best strategy, do you think?
You brought up that maybe somebody's going to board wipe. Learning when to evaluate how advantageous it is for your opponents to wipe the board at any given point is very important for playing those early creature deck strategies. And this is like going into game, like the fundamental playing of Magic, which is way beyond newer players. I learned that because I played those single player formats, right? Me against another person, I had to learn how to evaluate a board. Otherwise I was dead, because I mostly played aggro, except for that Esper control deck. Damn. It is very much a mental thing, knowing when to evaluate. But if you can see a board wipe coming, you don't want to play into it. At all. Just do not play a single thing if you see a board wipe coming.
Do you think more Commander players should play 60 card formats? Do you think that there's skills? I mean, we just brought up that one of evaluating the board and going and realizing how likely it is that someone's going to Wrath as one skill. Do you think there's quite a few skills that Commander players could learn from 60 card formats? It's
a difficult question, really, because if you started playing Commander first and then you go into those 60 card formats, you have the expectations of Commander, those big splashy spells that don't actually do anything in a 1v1, and that'll super easily fuck over all your enjoyment of those 2-player formats. But if you come from those competitive 2-player formats into Commander, it also ruins your experience of Commander because you're used to hyper-efficient cards that don't do anything in a 4-player game. The ideal thing would be to start both at the same time to fully grow. Ultimately, I think there are lessons to be learned from those 2-player formats.
No, I agree. I think there's less we can learn. Do you think if someone has been playing Commander for a while and they do want to pick up, Standard or Pauper or Modern or something, do you think how do you avoid that situation where you would? Because I'm imagining it now. If someone had, after I'd played 5 games of Commander, someone had been like, "Oh, come play Modern, I'll give you a deck," and I'd rocked up, I just would have been obliterated, you know, and I would have had a really nasty time. You know, I guess I'm speaking less now about, you know, deck building and such, and more about socializing. What's for a new player who's a bit nervous about something like that, what's the best way to dip your toes in the water with the 60 card format, do you think?
Oh, God. I don't know if there is an easy way to dip your toes in that format, in like those sorts of formats. I think you really just need to rip the Band-Aid off. If you're aware that you're going from Commander to those two-player formats, I think you need to be aware of the differences between efficiency in Commander and in two-player formats. You really, really need to know what those differences are, which is tough if you've never played half of those formats, right?
Do you think you could watch?
Oh, easily. You could totally watch. Easily, you could watch. Like, even Kitchen Table Magic, which has 0 stakes at all, is a good introduction there. But nothing really prepares you for a game of Modern like playing a game of Modern, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. I do think, yeah, you know, people out there who might be listening who have been playing for a while, if you're introducing someone to Magic the Gathering, just play at the kitchen table for a little while. Just play 1v1, you know, offer them a few tips, and I think play some Commander first. I think, yeah, it's just, it's tough. There is something that you can gain from playing 1v1. I think it tests my sort of Magic IQ, if you like, a bit more. Playing one-on-one than Commander. Commander's just a completely different kind of rule set, and sometimes it feels a bit chaotic. But in terms of the fun, I think the reason that Commander is the most popular format in Magic the Gathering is because it's kind of the only one that lacks that cutthroat, high-stakes first game. You know, you can play it at a kitchen table of Modern as much as you like, but the first time you go into the store, you know, if someone wipes the floor with you, if someone's a bit rude to you, it's going to kind of, well, that's going to ruin your day no matter what. You can have that in Commander too. But yeah, I feel like Commander is so good because it's that format where, yeah, you know, it can be your 3 friends who play Magic can be like, oh, come play. And they're the 3 who you're playing with. And there's nothing on the line. There's no high stakes. And, you know, you take your time. You get to see how a lot of other people, well, you see 3 other people play their decks at the same time. So, you're kind of gaining that information from 3 places, which is really cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just a format where you kick your heels up, crack open a fucking tinny or whatever, and you just chill out with 3 other people at the table, which is great. It's awesome fun playing Commander. Doesn't teach you a lot about those 2-player formats, though.
No, it's vastly different. It's vastly different.
I could get into Cube. We probably will at some point.
I know you're the cube person, so there will be cube questions later.
Cube is interesting in the same way that Draft teaches you how to play Magic, but it teaches you how to play a warped version of Magic that isn't quite right.
Oh, Draft is so different. Yeah, it's so different. I've been watching a lot of Samuel H. Black streams on Twitch. He's a pro player. Well, Pro Magic's kind of dead now, but he is a professional draft player. He has a podcast called Drafting Archetypes, where he talks about how to draft. It throws you in the deep end, but once you sort of get the hang of some of the language that's used, it's really cool. And yeah, watching him stream, it's like a different world. It's like when you watch I'm a terrible chess player, and it's like when you watch a grandmaster play chess, and particularly if they're explaining what they're doing, and you're like, what? Like they go, oh, I'm putting this here because it puts pressure on the queen. And you're like, the queen is on the other side of the board behind 5 pieces. What do you mean?
Oh,
but in their head, they're going, they want to play that knight there and that pawn there. And then the queen, you know, has a clear shot. Anyway, I won't get into chess. That could take forever as well.
I used to play like competitive chess through high school and primary school.
Oh, there you go.
Oh man, that is a game.
I feel like there's a lot of overlap. There's got to be a lot of overlap with Magic the Gathering, right? It's a similar
I've
Do you
I've
think?
heard people describe Magic as chess played with poker cards, which
That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
it makes sense. I can see the line of thinking there.
It's definitely chess with bluffing. I would definitely agree with that. There are a lot of different graveyard strategies. Like you said before, you have 6 Abzan decks, but none of them play the same, which is testament to how much you can do with the graveyard, I think. You can have reanimator strategies. Like I've got a Merrin deck, which is all about reanimating creatures from the graveyard. It's about abusing enter the battlefield effects. You can have sacrifice builds, which are usually more about cards like Blood Artist, draining your opponents for letting your small little dorks die. You can do mill. Phoenix decks will try to mill their opponents out. Bruvac, the Grandiloquent, Grandiloquent. I always say Grandiloquent, which is, like delinquent, like a teen rebel. When you are building
Grandiloquent? What the fuck?
what are you looking at?
I just looked up how to spell it. That's not a word. I refuse to believe that's a word.
It's a very weird word. Everyone comment how stupid that word is. When you're building a graveyardy deck, how do you keep focused? There are so many different things you can do. There's cards that can bring your creatures back. There's cards that can put more cards in your graveyard so that you have more ammunition, if you like. There's card draw cards that let you discard into the graveyard. When you're building a deck that synergizes around something in the graveyard, how are you conceptualizing making sure you don't go, sort of too far in one direction where your graveyard's full of stuff but you don't have anything to do? Or the opposite problem where you have all these cards to do stuff in the graveyard but there's nothing in the graveyard. How do you stay focused and make sure that your deck is doing what it wants to do?
I think this goes to deck construction, but when you're initially planning the deck, picking a lane or two's fine, and really making sure that you're only dealing with them, which is a whole other thing, card selection, whole other topic. I'll get into that in a bit. But really picking lanes at the start gives you a framework to work with, right? I mean, Carador's an Aristocrats Reanimator deck. There's no mill cards in there. There are no cards in that deck that go, take cards from the top of your library, put them in the graveyard. None. Literally nothing. It is all Aristocrats. And discard. Maybe it's not so clear cut anymore.
Interesting. Well, I can see that there's obviously a certain amount that you play by ear, being the Abzan master, of course. But, so picking a lane or two is a good way to go.
Yeah, picking that lane's pretty important. But don't be afraid to experiment. Have fun. It's Commander. Do whatever the fuck you want.
Absolutely. I've totally come around to that recently, of taking out cards. I'm looking at 2 cards and I'm like, oh, they're both so good, but I can only put one in the deck. And then I'm like, which one's fun?
Just play both.
Well, yeah, which one? Play both, totally. But a lot of the time, I'm literally just like, which of these will let me have more fun? And often it's the one that is more politicky. Like in my Flyers deck recently, I'm not going to remember the card name. It was I think it's a 3-mana white instant, and it says, you and target opponent each gain 2 life for each creature you control, and then you and target opponent each create 3... No, sorry. You do this one first. You and target opponent each create 3 1/1 spirits with flying, and then you and target opponent each gain 2 life for each creature you control. And when I cast it the other day, it's so fun because you can. I made 2 friends that day. I said hey, someone had a deck that was all about lots of tokens. It was Nick was playing Adrix and Nev, and so he got twice as many. And so I was like, oh, you can have that. And then I was like, hey, your life total's getting kind of low over there. I see that life total. How about a little bit of a buffer? Meanwhile, I get everything, and I get 2 friends in the process. Fun is definitely the way to go. You
can even extend on that. Playing suboptimal cards for fun increases the enjoyment of the game by far. One of the only monocolor decks I ever played was Charade. I could talk about that boy for ages. Greatest deck I've ever played. Most fun I've ever had playing Magic. I was playing 1/1s for like 4 mana. And they were really bad cards. Like, aggressively bad cards. But I had fun doing it. Like, the entire catchphrase I had was, "Here's this dumb rat I found," for the first creature I played. It was just fun. Play fun cards in Commander.
Definitely. And I think there's a delicate balance where, because it is fun to play silly cards though equally. So when you have all of the choices, you know, sometimes you're left with a choice between a card that is definitively very good, but not that fun, and something that's pretty good, but probably very fun. And I would always rather choose the latter, but that's, you know, that's not for everyone. Do you think that's something that because I do think that a similar problem happens when you are building decks related to synergy and particularly the graveyard, where you're tempted to put in something that looks cool and seems like it is cooler to do, but doesn't synergize so much. I found with my Merrin deck, I was often playing these cards that I was like, oh, if I could reanimate this, it would be so cool, you know? But then it's like, but is this what my deck is trying to do? Like I had Woodfall Primus in the deck.
Oh, God.
Which is has persist and says destroy target non-creature permanent when it enters the battlefield. And I was like, oh, if I can get to 8 experience counters, I'll be blowing stuff up like it's like there's no tomorrow. But it was not very fun at all. And I almost never got there as well. Like, it was kind of this weird territory that I think you only get in Commander, where you're like, oh, if I could only get this dream scenario, you know, they often call it Magical Christmas Land. If I could just get this Magical Christmas Land.
Magical Christmas Land it's not really limited to Commander. That happens everywhere.
No, it's true, but I think especially in Commander, you look at these big spells and you're like, oh, if I could just cast it. But I think a lot of the time my decks get better when I take them out, which is sad, but, you know, sometimes the reality, I think. Okay, we already spoke about Bojuka Bog. It's interesting you said you almost never see it, because I had a whole question about that. But if you never see it, then maybe it's not a problem but you ever need to think about when you're building a graveyard deck. Don't plan for Bojuka Bog.
I think I've seen it once.
Wow.
Plenty of graveyard hate, but it just doesn't really come up. Yeah, it's really, really weird. I can tell you theoretically what might happen if I see graveyard hate, but
yeah, I feel like I love Nick, and I love the way Nick makes his decks. But sometimes I see a card and I'm like, oh, Nick, I feel like, wouldn't it be better if you swap that card for this card? And then he's like, no, because in this specific scenario that has come up before, where someone blows up this, and this, then this card is really good. And I feel like Nick is so about contingencies, and it's great because sometimes, you know, when he cut, like last episode I was joking about Settle the Wreckage, but seriously, he waits, and when he casts Settle the Wreckage, he ruins your entire board. So he's prepared, but you can be over prepared, I think, with decks where you kind of go like, oh, if someone gets rid of my graveyard, I need to have, you know, these 3 cards that will stop that from happening, or that will like let me recover. Like, people play cards that get cards back from exile. And I'm kind of like, oh, surely at that point, that's overkill, right? You know, planning that far ahead.
It kind of is, but I do play cards that get cards back from exile. Because
do you really?
Because I run a lot of those graveyard tutors, like Entomb and Buried Alive, which almost always grab my combo pieces. So if someone exiles at my graveyard, I need that backup, because Safi's a non-replaceable part of the deck. There is no other Safi. There are plenty of those bring creatures back when it enters, but there's only one Safi.
Can you give a good example of a card to get something back from exile? That's something you would play?
Oh, there's a 3-mana green creature. I've completely forgotten the name, which is kind of unfair of me because it's in my deck. When it enters the battlefield, you take a card from your exile pile, puts it into your hand.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought that you would play those, but evidently... Yeah, I guess if there is a card that cannot be replaced, maybe it is worth having a contingency for if that card gets removed. Now, it is getting on a little bit for time, and I know that you really want to talk about Cube. So I might give you a little spotlight here to to talk about it a bit. Just because it is a Commander podcast, I would like to keep it somewhat focused on that. So the question that I have here is, what has Cube taught you about constructing decks for Commander?
Don't underestimate the power of a functional reprint. Cube is very much, well, the general accepted way to play Cube is Singleton, where you've only got one copy of any given card in a cube. Sometimes having those effects that can be replicated, right, is really important to help the balance of the cube. Aristocrats are pretty well known playstyle of Magic. You got a bunch of small creatures, sack them all, Blood Artist, kill them, right? There's one card named Blood Artist. There's like 50 different cards that do exactly what Blood Artist does.
Oh yeah, Falconwrath Noble.
Yep. Falconwrath Noble, Zulaport Cutthroat, Meathook Massacre, new one. Super excited about that one.
Really cool card. Yep.
Having those backups, which is what I've been talking about this entire episode, having backups is really important, and contingencies for knowing what you're going to do if something happens or something goes wrong. Having contingencies, super important.
Do you think, well, as as a bit of a purist myself, I sometimes resent having too much of the same thing in the deck, because I kind of, sometimes I don't want the deck to play exactly the same. Do you ever worry about, I mean, I guess with Aristocrats, I can't say this as being much of a problem. You know, having a Falconwrath Noble and a Zulaport Cutthroat down at the same time is better, I think, than having one, assuming that you have things to let die. Right. So you'd rather have those contingencies. So you know, would you run a Reclamation Sage and an Acidic Slime, for instance?
Funny you mention them. I run them both in Carador. But like the reasons for having multiple things in Cube and having multiple things in Commander, totally different reasons. Commander is all about consistency, which is pretty important in a singleton format. Especially when, you know, 4 players, all sorts of things. Cube is more about the health of the cube. If an entire archetype is predicated on one card, and a player picks up all a bunch of these cool support cards, but they're nothing to actually pay off with, just wasted. They're gone. They have to play mid-range, which is the fate of all fools in Magic.
Are you very aware of new cards that come out? Like, when a new set comes out, are you keeping an eye out for spoiler season? Like, are you looking out for reprints? Are you looking out for functional reprints? You know, what are you, as a Cube / Commander player, what are you looking for when the new sets come out?
In terms of Commander, I don't really give a shit about new cards. Meathook Massacre seems neat. I've only seen that because people have sent it 50 billion times into the Commander chat. I haven't looked at Innistrad really, except when I'm looking for Cube, which is when I restrict Scryfall, rarity equals common, that's it. I don't take it off that. I don't even look at the rest of the cards, right? A lot of the decks I have right now play the way I want them to. There's no need within me to make them more recent.
I definitely feel as though there's almost like a particular kind of FOMO, you know, fear of missing out in Commander of thinking, I don't know the newest cards. You know, you see a card that you haven't seen before and you're like, I didn't even know that card existed. How could I have missed this kind of thing? How do you reduce those feelings in Commander?
Okay, this goes into like product overload, and I could talk about that until I'm blue in the damn face. I figure we probably don't want that.
The next Vince episode.
Next Vince, it's just me talking about how Wizards is bad. FOMO, I think, is an industry tactic to get you to buy more things, which is scummy in and of itself, right? And is an inherent nature of capitalistic markets. But I don't really deal with it. I just don't look. If I don't know new sets release, I can't be upset about missing out, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. Is it worth having a real, I almost feel it's worth having a real dedicated mindset of thinking there might be a new version of a card that I have that is better, but that doesn't matter. Like, for instance, there's the new Innistrad instant that everyone's losing their mind over. That's 1 and a black, and it's destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. And everyone's saying, oh my god, it's the best version of this effect I've ever had. I'm picking up 10 copies. In fact, you know what? It's podcast. This is a PSA. If you don't have that card, it's okay. If you're running Go for the Throat, which is so similar in effect, but, you know, occasionally you can't blow up their... I had this problem the other day. Send Triplets is a friggin' artifact creature, so you can't kill it with Go for the Throat. If you have Go for the Throat and not the new spell in your deck, are you in on this PSA, Vince?
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Those
right?
black removal spells are good and well known because they're good and they hit basically everything that matters. Those little corner cases, who gives a shit? That just makes a story in Commander. That brings fun and chaos, which is what Commander's all about. It does not matter if you don't have one-size-fits-all removal. If anything, I'd argue that's objectively bad for your deck because it makes you rely on that sort of thing and it makes you not have fun. You told me about that story because it happened. You would not have told me if you had removed Send Triplets with that new instant because, whoop, it just happened. It's gone now.
It wouldn't be noteworthy, yeah.
It wouldn't be noteworthy. It wouldn't matter.
Mm.
It doesn't matter what you play.
I like it. Well, again, time is getting on. I am aware. Oof, yeah, pushing it. But let's move on to the very fun rapid fire questions. So these are 1 sentence answers, and I might probe you on it afterwards if I'm very intrigued by one. But let's see what you've got for me. What is the most important turn of the game in Commander?
Whatever turn I win on. Next question.
The winning turn. Most overrated card.
Eternal Witness. I think other cards do its job better. Overall, not a fan.
Whoa. Okay. I'm going to come back to that for sure. Most underrated card.
Can't wait for the entire comment section to call me
Eternal
an idiot.
Witness.
Most underrated card? Porphyry Notes. White color shifted version of Drop of Honey at like $20 as opposed to $20 billion. I'll take that any day.
What does it do?
Porphyry Notes. It destroys the weakest creature on the board, creature with the lowest power, at the beginning of your upkeep.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is wild.
Every upkeep.
On your upkeep, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I cannot wait to look up that card later when I'm editing this episode.
Told you it's underrated. No one knows what it is.
I mean, even the comparison card that you mentioned, I don't even know what that card is. Okay.
Oh, it's a reserve list card. Don't bother looking it up. It's
yeah.
$50 billion.
It's so funny that there are bad cards on the reserve list that are really expensive just because they're on the reserve list. Stupid thing. Different episode. Next episode, Vince and Walt dismantle capitalism once and for all.
Yeah!
A bad card that you love.
One with nothing. Easiest answer of my life.
That I saw a legitimate argument for why that is the worst card that has ever been printed.
I think you're wrong.
I didn't say it, but I'll pass it on to whoever I found that said that.
Let me tell you why. In a graveyard deck, the most important thing is having important cards in your hand in the graveyard instead. What is better than putting your entire hand in the graveyard for 1 mana? It's like the best card ever.
But there's nothing in your hand.
Who cares? Who cares? Who actually gives a shit?
This is definitely the person who has played charade at our friggin' table and had a blast, might I add.
Think about it, right? 1, 2, 3. Turn 3, I have the mana to cast Carador, but whoop, he costs 8 fucking mana. I cast 1 with nothing, I have 5 creatures in my hand. Whoop, he casts 3 now. I don't lose any card advantage.
That's interesting.
It is the best card ever printed. Thank you, Watsy.
There you go. Comment section, eat your heart out. Vin is coming for you with the hot takes.
Go nuts. Call me an idiot. I don't care.
Vin is prepared. Vin wants to fight. The final question. This program is, I want it to be all about improving. I host it because it's fun to talk to my friends, but also because I think you guys will teach me stuff. What do you think you could get better at as a Commander player? And is there someone at our store? Is there someone online who you think will help you get there?
I personally come from those 2-player formats. I have never really understood the concept of politicking. Never have. Probably never will. I might need to improve on that. I really might. I've never really understood it. I've never really done it, even. It's mostly because I play symmetrical effects. There's no room for politicking there. I cast Armageddon. What are you going to do? I don't choose whose lands don't get destroyed. It's everybody. We're all in this boat. We're all sinking.
All in this together. Next time you cast Armageddon, if you don't sing that song, I will dox you.
Oh, no!
All right. I think we better wrap it up there. It's been really, really fun chatting to you, Vin.
Likewise.
Is there anything you'd like to leave everybody with, or?
We've had a couple PSAs this lesson. I've got one for you all. Play graveyard decks. Just do it. Have fun. Play Magic for the hell of it.
Do it. Just do it. Do it. You guys can't see it, but I did a very, very poor impression of Shia LaBeouf just now. On that note, that's a good time to end anything. Mentioning Shia LaBeouf, that's how you know you've run out of things to talk about. Thanks heaps for joining me, Vin, and I look forward to the inevitable episode 2, Bye Bye Capitalism.
Look out for my thesis. It's coming. You better be fucking ready for it, Walt.
Oh, I will be. All right. That's all we got time for. Thanks very much for tuning in, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next one.